The National Center for Training, Support, and Technical Assistance.
We are a group of health and human service professionals and allies that are dedicated to increasing healthcare capacity and infrastructure in communities, and particularly communities of color in the United States, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands.
Here at NCTSTA, we are a very busy crew. We create products and services for providers in public health. We do trainings and webinars to educate the community and service providers on a host of different issues related to health equity.
One of the things that we are most proud of is the impact that we have, not just on the communities that we serve, but with the community-based organizations that we work so closely with.
Our belief is that when communities thrive and people thrive, we all benefit.
All right, so welcome everybody again. My name is Joanna Tadella from Proceed NCTSTA. Today, we are going to be examining the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities' cultural values in mental health care with our guest speaker, JR Kuo, who we are very excited to have on board for this event. So before we get started, a few housekeeping things. Please use the left button on your screen to use the chat. You can chat to everybody or somebody in particular. If you have any problems, technical issues, or questions, please text or send a message to Shay Martinez. She's going to be our producer today. You can also use the Q&A section to ask specific questions for our speaker, JR. And we're going to be answered those ones either as they come or in specific sessions, depending on the questions. So please feel free to do this. So the Center for Health Equity program is to build the capacity of leaders and staff within community-based healthcare settings to identify and address health inequities at the organizations and community-wide levels. This is what we do at NCTSTA. And our hashtag is PROCIBA, CIBA for Health, and you can follow in all of our social medias to be in touch with us and to get the latest information about our webinars, trainings, and events. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we want to do is get to know you. Shay, could you please start the poll? I don't have access to it. Thank you, Shay. So the first question is quick questions. We want to know in which region of the United States you are located: West, Midwest, South, Northeast, or Caribbean. What type of organization do you represent? Are you a hospital, a community-based organization, government agency in any size or level, health clinic, or other? And if it's other, let us know on the chat box. We also want to know your position within your organization. Are you a frontline, clinical, or non-clinical? Are you mid-management, or are you leadership, or you are other? And also let us know in the comment box. All right, once we reach 80%, Shay will close the polls. We're going to give everybody a few more seconds. Okay, Shay, let's go ahead and close. Thank you. And can you share? All right, so 38% of you are from the Midwest. Great. We also have 25% of you from the West and Northeast and the South. So we have a really good representation. Most of you are from community-based organizations, which is great. We also have government agencies and others. We have here Jonathan from a large regional nonprofit, which is great. Welcome. And the last question about the positions, we have a variable amount of people here. So most of you are from mid-management, but we also have non-clinical frontline and leadership as well as others that I don't see in the chat. So everybody, welcome so much. Thank you, Shay. And let's talk about quick the objectives. Today, we're going to explore the cultural values of Asian American community, learn how racism and discrimination impacts this community and their mental health. We're also going to learn how we can provide support to people that have experienced anti-Asian racism. And the great thing about this, not only is because this topic is so relevant and so important now more than ever, but it really can be applied to any other ism and any other culture that faces racism or any other ism as well. So it's a great opportunity for all of us to apply in our personal and our professional lives. All right, so today we have Mr. JR Kuo. He is a diversity and inclusion and mental health speaker, trainer, and coach. And he joins us from Coffee with JR. JR, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so you can go ahead and introduce yourself and get started.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Just give me 1 second. Let me share the screen and everything looks good. So all right, welcome everyone to this webinar about examining AAPI communities' cultural values in mental health care. I really want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for allowing me to be in your space. And of course, I want to thank the National Center for Training Support and Technical Assistance for inviting me for this amazing opportunity to work with you all. And specifically, I want to thank Joanna for hosting, organizing, and making this webinar happen. I know there's a lot of behind the scene work, so I just appreciate all her assistance, at least to me, that I don't have to do much work. So thank you. So, all right, again, my name is JR Kuo. I'm a professional speaker and trainer that specializes in mental health in higher education and diversity and inclusion. So my life's mission is to normalize mental health conversations and prevent suicide. And as a person of color, diversity and inclusion and racial justice are my life and my passion. So here's a little bit more about me. So I was born in Taiwan, a little island in Asia. And when I was around 9 years old, I moved to California. So I pretty much grew up between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I went to University of Colorado in Boulder for my undergrad. From there, I moved to Hawaii and lived there and worked there for a couple of years. I know, Hawaii. So, and I went back on my master's at a Jesuit college. From there, I went on to work for NAPIMA, which stands for National Asian American Pacific Islander Mental Health Association. So that was about a long time ago, 12, 13 years ago, when I started working for NAPIMA. And that's when I started also my mental health journey, recovery journey. So NAPIMA's mission is to advocate mental health wellness for Asian American Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians. So it is a great organization. Again, it kickstarted both my personal and professional journey in mental health. And then 3-4 years ago, I started my own company called Coffee with JR, which I focus more providing more cultural competency training, both in diversity and inclusion to general public. And over the last 10 years of professional speaking, I'm very fortunate to have worked with over 50 different universities across the country and dozens of corporations and nonprofit organizations. So this is a little bit about me. So I really want everyone to come out today's workshop with the idea that there are things that we can do to improve, have more understanding about diverse and awesome Asian American cultures and stop this whole anti-Asian hate and racism. And sadly, there's this continual emotional trauma brought on by racist attacks and assault on Asian and Asian Americans. So mental health has always been part of our lives, but has often been ignored or brushed aside and not talked about. Thus, we need to break down the walls of mental health stigma and racism and advocate for hope equality, equity, and justice. So we can all have a better quality of life. So I'm just going to skip this because oh, by the way, this is my talk. So, and this is acknowledgement that I want to give people, books, and organizations that inspire me. And so yeah, so today's learning objectives are, we're going to explore values of within Asian American communities. And we are going to learn how racism and discrimination impact Asian American mental health. And we can learn, and last, we can learn about how we can provide support to people that have experienced anti-Asian racism, provide mental health support. So I'm going to start just diving directly. And by the way, if you have questions like what Joanne and I was saying earlier, feel free to pin a chat box, and the moderator will, if there's a immediate question, the moderator you're welcome to interrupt me, and just ask a question. So, all right, I'm going to start off. This is us. This is us. So let's start off with, I know this is kind of a funny question that I like to put out. What's your favorite Asian cuisine with dish? And can you please put your answer in the chat box, please?
All right, let's see. I guess while we wait for the chat, I'll tell you which one is my favorite, and that is banh mi sandwiches, Vietnamese sandwiches.
Oh yeah,
they are the best.
Yes.
We have Kapoon here. I hope I'm saying it correctly.
Yes, Kapoon, that's awesome. Yummy. Thai, Korean, nice. Sushi, of course. Okay. So back to banh mi, I think, I know you're living like East Coast. There's a lot of like sandwich out there, amazing. And I just have to say, like, banh mi is still my favorite one. I know I'm going to receive a lot of hate mails right now. So other sandwiches are amazing too. So banh mi is my favorite. Drunken noodle, my fun, nice. So yeah, so cool. Thank you for sharing. So as you can tell throughout this workshop, we're going to have different interaction through chat and through poll. So Vietnamese pho, especially wintertime, pho is so good. Korean barbecue, you can't beat that. You can, yeah, steamed chicken, and Korean fried chicken. Oh my God. So it's my lunchtime here, FYI. So I'm getting really hungry because, of course, I'm going to blame on all you all. I'm just kidding. So, all right. So I'm just going to start off with sharing with all of you the information and history about Asian Americans. We Asian Americans I consider ourselves our unique species because a lot of us are both Asian and American at the same time. Because we are not fully Asian because we were born in this country, we grew up in this country. At the same time, we're not fully, we are American, but we're not like white American. We're not Black American. Thus, in a way that we are kind of like unique, amazing, but at the same time, the challenges that we face and experience can be very, very different. So I'm just going to throw some of the data information about us just to you all. Based on the Pew Research Center and U.S. Census, Asian American, we are the fastest growing racial or ethnic group in the United States. There are about 22.4 million of us here. And so about 8% overall population. And by 2060, the projection is that our population is going to double. And it might become between 15 to 20% of the population, just depends on the birth rates. So in a way that we are truly diverse, because we Asian Americans within this country, we can trace our roots back to 20 countries in Asia with unique histories, cultures, and languages. Just language-wise, there are over 20 spoken Asian languages in United States alone, in United States. So what you can see on the slide, these are the different Asian languages on how to say hi, And due to longer history of Chinese and Japanese presence in the United States, and their cultural influences, and in a way, lack of geography education within our country, and the subtle acts of racism and discrimination, Americans often associate Asian with East Asian folks. In reality, Asian is a vast continent, larger than North America and Europe combined. They are 48 countries in Asia. And so all of Asian Americans, most of us, 40% of us in this country are from East Asia. So Taiwan, China, Japan, and Korea. And 30% is what we call Southeast Asia. Those are Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and so forth. And 20% are from South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bhutan, all those good places. And rest of us are from Central Asia, Kazakhstan, pretty much all the countries that end with Stan. So, and personally, I think that Asia, like India itself or South Asia itself should be its own category, its own continent, because of their vast historical, cultural diversity. Just amazing. But some of that being said, I'm proud to be lumped some in with my South Asian brothers and sisters as AAPIs, Asian Americans. So another thing about Asian American is that there's no Americans without the history of immigration. So 6 in 10 Asian Americans were born outside the United States. So pretty much 1/3 of us are either immigrants ourselves, or we have a close relative, a friend that's an immigrant. And the biggest Immigration Act of 1965, that was a lot of our population in the United States had to do with this Immigration Act of 1965. And the reason is because there was a huge labor shortage in the United States after World War II, after Korean War, and around that time. So the need for skilled workers, such as nurses and engineers. So talking about supply and demand, an Asian country back then even now had a lot of supplies of workers. And the examples are Filipinos provided a lot of nurses after World War II in Korean Wars, because Filipino, the government, and this had to do due to their domestic policy of putting emphasis on STEM, in countries like Philippines, India, Japan, Taiwan. Therefore, these countries can provide, or could provide, a lot of engineers and researchers, and was what we call specialized labor. Also, this act has a clause on family unification, meaning that green card holders will neutralize U.S. citizens that came over to work. Once they have their green card and U.S. passport, they can sponsor their siblings and parents to United States. And as you all know, family is huge across Asian cultures. So, and last is due to, American involvement in wars in Asia. People from countries like South Korea, Vietnam, Philippines, a lot of them migrate here as refugees. So, and I'm able to speak in front of you. My existence in the United States is pretty much the indirect result from this Immigration Act. So in our existence here in the United States, no matter how Americanized we are, our identities, mental health, thinking, behavior, family values are closely, directly, indirectly tied to our Asian heritage, to our immigration pasts. And another thing that I want to talk to before I move on is, some people always want to know about similarities and differences between Asian Americans. Personally, I think this is a wrong question, or it's not a really good approach. Because let me give you an example. Would you ask, what are the similarities and differences between an Englishman from England and a Polish man from Poland? Not really, even though both of them live on the same continent, Europe. And we know that these two men have very different, separate identities. So again, same logic applies to understanding Asian and Asian American culture. Yes, culturally, some regions have similarity. At the same time, we need to be careful lumping everyone together because we're truly diverse. A person from Japan, his or her culture difference is going to be very, very different from Vietnam or Thailand. So the question that I encourage you all to ask, to explore is, how can I learn more about Asian cultures as separate and unique identities? And instead of asking, where are you from? No, tell me, where are you really from? You can ask something like, can you please tell me more about your ethnicity? Because again, a lot of Asian Americans have been here for a generation, 2 generations, or 3 generations. So, so when and let me give you another example. Is that like when we share our ethnicity, please also check your bias. Avoid telling or share with them irrelevant information. Let me give you an example. And I have experienced this a lot. When I told people that, yeah, I was born in Taiwan, a lot of time their first reaction would be, oh, cool. You know that there's a really good Vietnamese restaurant down the street from my place, and their food is amazing. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, yo, bro, Taiwan and Japan are 2 different countries that are thousands of miles away. Again, will you compare Spanish speaking person to a German speaking person? Because you won't. We know that they are very different. So, all right. So this is us in a nutshell. This is us. So any questions in the chat box or in Q&A? Because I can keep talking about this. There are a whole academic major and specialty about this topic, and I can talk about this for hours. So again, I encourage you, before I move on, I encourage you all to take some time to do some research and learn more about the amazing, wonderful, tragic challenges, beautiful history and culture of Asian Americans. So if there are no questions, I'm going to dive in directly into a really, really important issue that for me is about the whole anti-Asian hate. So,
all right, I don't see any questions at this time, so we can go ahead and start the first poll.
Thank you. So the first poll question is, have you ever had conversation about anti-Asian racism or just racism in general with your friends, colleagues, or family? And the second part of the question is, how comfortable and open are you talking about anti-Asian racism or just racism in general? So please take a minute to answer these questions.
We're starting to receive some answers, so we're going to wait a few more seconds. All right, let's wait a few more seconds to finish. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the answer for, have you ever had conversations about anti-Asian racism? We have 58% said sometimes, 25% said all the time, and 17% said once or twice. The good thing is that nobody said never.
Great, thank you.
And question 2, how comfortable are you with talking about anti-Asian racism and racism in general? The majority, 50% of people say they are usually comfortable, 33% very comfortable and open, and 17% sometimes uncomfortable.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for your all sharing. So it seems like we are around, like it seems like the participant, the audience are pretty open. We'll have conversation around these conversations before. So thank you so much. And then the one that said that something uncomfortable, hopefully by end of this workshop, that you'll feel even a little bit more inspired and more comfortable to have these conversations. So when COVID hit, I remember going to my local grocery store. By the way, I live in a pretty quote unquote diverse liberal neighborhood-ish in Denver. So while walking down an aisle in a grocery store, a big white man bumped into my shoulder and said, "Get the hell out of here." So that was around May 2020. So of course I was frightened, I was agitated, I was angry, I was afraid. Afterwards, I have these thoughts, or these feelings like anxiety, like fear of going out to grocery store or go for leisure walks, fear my safety. Of course, there's this self-blame that like, maybe there's something wrong with me. Of course, it comes with that embarrassment, that shame that maybe I don't belong here. My experience at a grocery store is just one of thousands of experiences that many Asian Americans and people of color have experienced since COVID, before COVID, for decades and for centuries. And if you have ever experienced this and feel this, I want to acknowledge you and validate your experience by saying that I hear you and I feel you. So there's this history of anti-Asian sentiment in this country, centuries. Racism is and has been a pandemic in the United States. Racism did not just come up from nowhere and did not just vanish because we ended segregation and Obama was the president. Racism toward Asians, specifically the Chinese and Japanese man, which can be dated all the way back to the 1860s, when the Chinese came over to the United States to build the railroads. Chinese racist terms such as the Yellow Terror, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the model minority myth, was specifically targeting Chinese and Asian men and women. Chinese Exclusion Act is the first immigration law ever passed in the United States. And the law specifically target an ethnic group of people, Asian, Chinese nationals, from entering the United States. Even though they have already brought hundreds and thousands of Chinese over to build the railroads before. And this law, Chinese Exclusion Act, did not get repealed until 1943, when during the World War II, when the United States needed the Chinese to fight the Japanese. The Yellow Terror is a propaganda targeting Chinese and Asian, depicting that they are an existential danger and threat to Western world and the States. And of course, in the 20th century, all the wars that the United States has engaged in with different Asian countries resulted in racist practices, assault, and harassment to its own citizens that are Asian descendants. One of the examples, Japanese internment camps during World War II. Americans that were locked up in camps just because they look Japanese, they look Asian. And again, I can go on and on with this. Of course, due to the wars in Middle East, our Muslim brother and sister got discriminated back, and moving on to right now, COVID. Is that, even before COVID right now, and current and ongoing, another thing that we have faced is what we call model minority myth. And model minority myth is a belief that all Asians are doing very well in this country because there's a certain percentage of Asian Americans are succeeding, like going to good universities, owning businesses. Also that, it's believed that Asian children are whiz kids that are good with math, music, engineer, you name it. Don't get me wrong. Yes, there are a lot of hardworking, successful Asian Americans. At the same time, the reality is that, like any other challenges of other demographic groups, there are a lot of Asian Americans experience poverty, lack of access to healthcare and mental health, lack of affordable housing. This is a form of stereotype that erases the differences among individuals. It ignores the diversity of cultures and identities of Asian Americans. It often glosses over the racism against Asian American. It's like, I'm saying good stuff about you people, therefore I cannot be racist. Or something like, I know Asian people. Well, my cousin's wife is Asian. They are great people, therefore I cannot be a racist. And part of this model minority is that it perpetuates this narrative that Asians are hard workers, good workers, but not good enough to be on the leadership. position. And I will talk more about that later. It also justifies a way of lack of governmental funding to Asian communities, because the stereotype that Asians are exceptional, they do not need help. You know, I still remember before COVID, I was in the disbelief is so prevalent, so very prevalent in our society that 2 years ago, before COVID, I was at a business networking event, and I was talking to people in my age, in their 30s, and they still believe this. They asked me, why do I talk about mental health? Why do I teach about mental health? Because old Asians are doing very well. This is what they said at a business networking event. And last, model minority myth was invented back in the 70s to put down other racial groups, to pit the Asians against the Blacks and the Hispanic, saying something like, hey, see, the Asians, they have made it. Why can't you? So model minority is very, very problematic. And another thing that we also experience a challenge is that microaggressions. And for those that are not familiar with microaggressions, here on your slide, they are the definition. So they are pretty much the daily insults and identity that perpetrated against marginalized or oppressed people. And they are what the example I like to use that they have these little cuts. You know, like one paper cut, no big deal. But just imagine getting these paper cuts over and over again every day and throughout your whole life. Those are microaggressions. For me, I'm kind of like one paper cut, I will already scream my lungs off, you know, let alone all these paper cuts. So microaggressions are like these little paper cuts. And let me go through a couple of examples. So some of the microaggressions that we often experience and face. First, accents. When when they hear British or Australian accent, they immediately think that, oh my God, that's classy, that's sexy. And the moment I hear Asian accent, like Southeast Asian accent or Mandarin, their reaction often will be like, yeah, gross, immigrants. And and oftentimes make fun of our accents. And another thing is that our foods often got make fun of. I know right now Korean cuisine is very popular, you know, kimchi is everywhere. Growing up in the 90s and 2000, it wasn't the case. You know, I often heard that I hate Asian food, you know, even though they have never tried before. Oftentimes, our food is being labeled as gross, the texture is weird, it's too fishy, you name it, And the whole myth behind MSG gives you a bad headache. There's just no scientific proof behind it. However, it still keeps going on with Chinese restaurants, a way to put down Chinese restaurants. And the last example is, where are you from? No, where are you really, really from? And of course, another example is I noticed that people would intentionally speak to me slower and louder because I look like Asian. So all these are subtle jabs toward Asians to make us feel and seem inferior and less than. So another one that we are experiencing is in society, and this is based on a 2017 NPR Harvard School of Public Health found that 35% of us experience racial comments and assumptions. This is a lot. And the last one I want to share is what we called in the workplace bamboo ceiling. Have you noticed that because of model minority myth that we are the best employees, but somehow we are never good enough to be in a leadership position? So bamboo ceiling is the process and barriers that serve to exclude Asians and Asian Americans from executive position on the basis and the bias that we lack leadership potential. We are not good at communication skills because we are too passive. We will perceive too quiet to be a leader. And I have heard from so many of my different Asian American friends that they got passed on for promotion, because they are not leadership material. So now moving on to I have next set of poll is the questions are whether it's due to COVID or another incident. Have you experienced racist attack or harassment or discrimination because you are an Asian American? If that question doesn't apply to you, it's all good, because the next question is whether it's due to COVID or another incident. Do you know personally an Asian American that has experienced racist attack, harassment, or discrimination because that person is an Asian American?
Right, we already started with some responses. We're going to allow a few seconds to get the answers. All right, a few more seconds left to please answer if you have experience or if you know personally an Asian American who has experience at racist attacks, harassment, or discrimination. All right, we're gonna allow 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. And for the first question, we have 46% saying yes, they have experienced this because they are Asian American. 8% say no, and 46% say that it's not applicable. However, when it's for knowing somebody personally who is Asian American that has experienced these attacks, 69% say yes, and 31% say no.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, especially the ones that say yes. Thank you for being vulnerable and willing to share. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So again, my experience at a grocery store is just one of thousands of encounters that Asian Americans have gone through since the beginning of COVID. So this is data by Anti-AAPI Hate, Stop AAPI Hate. Over 9,000 Asian Americans reported being physically or verbally assaulted. That's about 20 Asian Americans got assaulted per day. And these are underreported too, because we Asian, we don't like to report stuff. Oftentimes, what do all these assaults look like? They manifest in the forms of we get spit on, yelled at, physically attacked, verbally assaulted. They like to target older Asian men or younger Asian men, or what I call the smaller physique Asian man. Oftentimes we were called names. Chinese virus will tell us to go back where we're from. So with this, it's historical racism toward Asians and current harassment assaults. It shows that our status is conditional. We're either the model minority, the whiz kids that are good with math and go to Ivy League university, the best employees, or we are the enemy, the virus. It seems like there's nothing in between. We, the whole Asian population, are often the scapegoats and getting blamed for whatever trivial reasons. We are this perpetual immigrants or foreigners, even though there are millions of us have been here for generations. So no matter how American we are, it's almost like we will never be considered American. I still remember when Dr. DJ Ida, my mentor and the executive director of PIMA, when we were in Nashville, people kept asking her, Dr. DJ Ida, where are you from? Even though after she told them repeatedly that she was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. Dr. DJ Ida is a third generation Japanese American that can't even speak any Japanese. Almost all Asian Americans that I know have very similar experience. How does all this discrimination make us feel? They must make us feel frightened, uneasy, unsafe. It's a constant reminder that we do not belong here, that we are less than, that we are not worthy the same respect that white folks are afforded. They keep us off balance, keep us distracted, and keep us defensive. They literally can keep us from enjoying a dinner in a restaurant or a day at the office. So the mental health impact from racism, hate, and discrimination is that more and more studies have shown that there's a direct relationship between racism and mental health. According to CDC, people of color that have experienced racism also experience depression emotional distress, anxiety, PTSD, and suicidal thoughts. The fear of racism itself is harmful to people of color's mental health. Black adults are 20% more likely to report serious psychological distress than adult whites due to racism. I can go on and on with all this research data on race, the trauma that come from being hit, physically assaulted, verbally assaulted is very detrimental. So I'm just going to run through these data, mental health data really fast. So 1 in 5 is 1 in 25. Those are the numbers. So general Americans experiencing mental health. So 1 in 5 is just general mental health condition they experience in any given year. 1 in 25 is more serious mental illness. And when it comes to Asian Americans, 44% of Asian Americans have mental health distress. 6% of Asian Americans have serious mental illness. And out of 6% of Asian Americans with serious mental illness, only 37 reported using any mental health services. This includes just general doctors. And here's a little bit more data on suicide rate with general Americans population and Asian Americans. So it's 9th leading cause of death for Asian Americans, especially between age 20 and 24. And here's a little bit more data. I know that I think you will get a copy of these slides, so I'm going to run through this data really fast. So almost 20% of Asian American high school students reported considering suicide. Suicide death rate are 30% higher for 15 years old to 24 years old Asian American females. So oftentimes these have to do with bullying, of course, with bullying, racism, internal pressure too, academic pressure, you name it. So, all right, this brings us to our next poll question.
Before we get to the poll, JR, we have 2 questions. We have a question from Giselle. She says that racism is insidious. Any suggestions about how various racial or ethnic groups can come together and support each other's efforts?
Thank you so much for that question. And can I address that question like toward the end? Like, because
Absolutely.
that will come up later.
The other question that we have here is from Koa, and says, this is a good history and canvas of Asian experiences. I haven't heard anything about Pacific Islanders. How does this context reflect and intersect with Pacific Islander experiences? PI folks are always left out of these narratives, and their unique experience are lumped into Asian Americans, while disproportionately impacted by COVID. I hope to hear more.
Thank you so much for asking that question. Thank you. So I agree with you. I think a lot of time Pacific Islanders information and data often being left out. And I also have to apologize that like due to, and I'm one of these, I'm guilty of that because due to the time of everything, I didn't put information with data about Pacific Islanders. And that being said, I have worked with different Pacific Islanders communities, for example, from Guam, from Marshall Islands. And yes, and a lot of them, and then there's a population of Pacific Islanders in this country from, Marshall Islands, from Guam, from Saipan, all those countries. And they, their experiences in this country often face very similar, especially when it comes to racism, face very similar like what we have. However, they don't have what we call model minority method. Their racism is more, I would say, heavily associated with classism too, because they are often associated with islanders. And there's this connotation from us, at least from my research and observations, that they often got put down, not only because of their skin color, it's also that they are from quote unquote small countries, that they are not important, which is really, really sad. And I think we do need to spend more time. And so I highly recommend, if Priscilla and I, we can work together in the future, I would love to just have one workshop address their needs and wants in mental health. And in fact, when I was working with NAPIMA, we have done a lot of work addressing Pacific Islanders issues. So yeah, thank you for that question.
All right, I'm going to launch the poll. We have 2 questions on this poll again. How open are you about talking about your mental health? Very open, open, not open, never talk about it, or not sure. And then overall, how would you rate your mental health right now? Excellent, somewhat good, average, somewhat poor, or not sure. All right, we're gonna wait a few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we have 46% say that they are open to talk about their mental health, and 38% say they're very open. We do have 8% saying not open, and 8% has never talked about it. When it comes to their mental health, 8% say it's excellent,
That's awesome.
somewhat
Okay.
good, 8%, 46% is average, and 31% is poor, and we do have 8% that say they're not sure.
Awesome. Thank you all again. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. So, to mental health stigma, and mental health stigma is across the board. It's across the board. And in Asian American communities, I would say it's a little bit more heightened. Because oftentimes we don't acknowledge or talk about mental health openly. The stigma runs deep into our cultures. This may be due to faith or religious beliefs, cultural values, and language barriers, and lack of understanding or fear of unknown. So in a way that also the field and concept of mental health is relatively new to our people and cultures too. And so you have probably hear phrases like this: keep it within the family. We don't want to shame our family. We are barely surviving here. We can't afford to talk about mental health. Or like example, like the moment I talk about mental health, I'm admitting that there's something wrong with me. There's a lot of fear. And also that I must be successful. I cannot show any signs of weakness. And another common one is that I don't want to be a burden for my family and friends. Again, I want to say that I hear you and I feel you. The stigma is real. It's scary, uncomfortable, and unknown. And however, due to delayed response to mental health, to trauma, can cause sleep disorders, nightmares, depression, anxiety, chronic fatigue, ultimately impact the quality of our lives. In other words, if you don't take care of ourselves, we can easily get stuck in a cycle of constant stress and trauma, which can bring additional burden and pain to our life and hinder our quality of life. And the worst is most likely we'll pass on this stress and trauma down to our children. And this is called generational trauma. The good news is that there's hope and recovery is very, very possible. Like physical wounds or illness, if you hurt your leg, you need to slow down, clean the wound, and let your leg heal. Similarly to our mental health, when we don't feel good, having depressive states or anxiety, we need to slow down and heal ourselves, heal our brain and emotions. The old stigma tells us that once you have mental health issues, you are done for the rest of your life. The reality is that most mental health challenges like physical wounds can be healed if you take care of it. The main reason you feel like forever is because we do not take care of ourselves or take the time to heal ourselves. That's when it comes to our emotional mental health, we need to re-educate ourselves and tell ourselves that it's okay to talk about our traumas, our feelings, and mental health. Why? That there's always hope. Recovery is very, very possible. So moving on to, so probably all of you are thinking that, okay, what can we do now when we witness an anti-Asian racist incident?
Before we move on to this portion, JR, we do have a quick question.
Okay.
An anonymous question came saying, as a first-generation Asian, how do we cope with all of this? Is there anything else you would like to add?
So cope with mental health stigma?
Yes.
So that's a really, really good question. So, and this is what I'm going to go through. So hopefully these tools can help us, can help you support each other. So, and because at the last portion of this is I'm going to share some mental health tools. So thank you for the question. So now, before that, I'm going to talk about how can we support each other or people that you know that have experienced anti-Asian racism. And here's another poll. So study has shown that when a person that has experienced harassment, almost 80% of them wish, oh, go ahead, you can have the poll up. 80% wish someone would help. Unfortunately, only 25% of them say that someone had actually stepped in. So what are some common reasons that you hesitate to provide support to someone that's experiencing harassment or hate or racism?
Second, I think I have to relaunch the poll. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's
All right, so the options are, I just don't know how. I am unsure if that's offensive or not. I might make things worse. I don't want to risk my job or career, or I am new at this position. And if it's something else, please put it in the chat if you feel comfortable sharing. All right, a few more seconds. Okay, I'm closing in 3, 2, 1. So the results say the 25% say they don't know how. It might make things worse or something else. And then 70% say they're unsure if that's offensive or not. And then 8% don't want to risk their job or their career, or they're just new at the position. I don't see anybody sharing there's something else.
okay. Again, thank you so much. And for you all, thank you so much for sharing. And I feel you, the reality is that there's no one way or the right way to intervene a disrespectful and microaggressive behavior or racist behavior. In fact, there are other actions that we can take that are less confrontational while still taking care of ourselves in relationships. So here are the 6 tools that we can use. And I'm going to run through these 6 tools really fast, and we are going to practice on how to use these 6 tools in a little bit. So the first one is what I call ask and repeat. Ask for clarification, for more information, or repeat it back what it is said. By asking back, repeating back, you give an opportunity for the person to reflect, to catch, and check on their comment. Here are a couple of questions you can repeat or ask back. One time when I was in college, I cracked a very insensitive joke, thinking that I was being funny. My friend literally repeated back to me. And the moment she repeated back to me, I realized how stupid and disrespectful I was. And she literally said that if I hear you correctly, you say boom, boom, boom. Next one is what I call express. Express your feeling with discomfort. So setting standard by letting the perpetrator knows that this type of language is not welcome here. The key thing about express is using I statements. So it's not direct or confrontational. It's about letting others know that the impact of their language, their microaggressive language, is causing uneasiness to your emotional state and emotions. And you don't have to be angry or pissed. You just say that like, what you say makes me unsettled, uneasy. I don't want to be part of this conversation. And the next one is what I call upstander. So this is what it is the most direct. Challenge the stereotype, challenge the racism by calling it out. And there are 2 ways to do so. One is called call out. You're literally calling that person out right there and right now, telling that person that, hey, you're being really, really disrespectful. This type of language does not be here. You just boom. Call in is if you know the person, you can invite the person to a conversation by asking that person to step aside and explain to that person that why it is disrespectful and inappropriate, and hopefully have a real and learning conversation with that individual. Depending on your relationship with that person, that colleague, that friend, and your emotional state and circumstances, call out can be good. At the same time, call in might be a little bit softer, more welcoming. It can be better and productive way, option 2. And so here are some examples. I like, have a second, can I talk to you in a comfort room? And the reason is because remember that most of the time that individuals say these microaggressive phrases or disrespectful phrases done so reactively. They might have heard those from their buddy or they seen a YouTube video and thought that saying these things might be witty or funny to say out loud and never took the time to reflect on the implication of these quote unquote phrases and jokes. Next one is document. Work, life can get really, really busy and you can get pulled from different directions. After a while, you might not remember exactly what happened and decide to let it go. Thus, it's important to write it down, even on a piece of paper or on your phone. Because especially if microaggressive behavior are repeated, you can present your document, let's just say that in your workplace to your HR or to higher up. Or even if it's one of your family members or cousin, at least you have something to show that, hey, I noticed that you've been saying a lot of these disrespectful things, not just one incident. You've been doing this for months. So another one is what we call refer. Depending on your comfort level, your mental health state, you don't have to intervene directly by yourself. Maybe you know another coworker that's close with the perpetrator and you think that's going to be much more efficient and productive to have other coworker intervene, well, another person to intervene. So, again, the idea behind refer is that you are not alone. You're not alone. At a grocery store, if it happens, you can talk to, if you don't want to do it directly, maybe ask the security to step in, ask the store clerk to step in. The last one is support, checking with the victim, with the subject, and offer support afterwards. Even if you decide to document, making eye contact with the victim initially to give reassurance can provide and boost the confidence within the victim. Take the negative energy attention away from the perpetrator. Of course, always checking with the victim afterwards. So here's an organization, and this is more like workplace. It's called Empower Work. So they are trained volunteers to help. They connect you with a real person to direct you to appropriate professional help when it comes to work discrimination. So, and this is a number. Text hello. So this is a really amazing organization. And so these are the 6 intervention tools. And I often say that your safety is number 1. Not only your physical safety, but also your emotional and physical safety. Thus, we'll react differently as bystander. If you engage with ask, or repeat, or express, please do so in a non-aggressive but assertive way. Avoid being condescending because it can create more friction. If you decide to be direct, maybe use call in. So being bystander is always about taking care and support the person is being disrespected at. Whether your intervention method is direct or refer, please make sure to follow up afterwards with the victim. So from here, oftentimes, a lot of you in the poll earlier, a lot of you said that like, I don't know what to do. I might make things worse. So how can we, here are the 3 steps is to move from inaction to action. How can we act? First step is observe the situation. Second step is reflect and checking with yourself by asking these 3 questions. So I borrowed these 3 questions from mental health first aid. Are you prepared to express concern without judgment? Are you the best person to help this person? Can you invest the appropriate amount of time right now in a conversation to help this person? If you have clarity to these 3 questions, you're on your way to be the best supporter. Once you check in with yourself, ask these 3 questions, then decide which support tool that works for you. So now we're going to practice a little bit. Here's a scenario, and here are the poll that you can decide. So you're at a grocery store. Men start yelling anti-Asian slur at an Asian lady. How can you intervene and provide support? Oh, shoot. So first one, Janet, is the poll up?
No. 1 second.
Okay. It's okay. If you don't have it, maybe please put your answer in the chat box. You can put
Yeah,
one.
we have to do this one in the chat.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is something else. If you know something else, please put your answer in the chat box. Again, 1 is document. Take a photo and video the person. And second, support. Make eye contact with the Asian lady to acknowledge her. 3 is refer. Call 911 or ask store clerk to assist. Upstander, or if you feel safe, directly tell that person he's been a racist. So if you can put your option, which one you feel more comfortable, in the chat box, that would be awesome.
Right, we have 2. They want to support. We have somebody that wants to be an upstander. Somebody's going to document. Another person is also upstander. Upstander keeps showing up in the chat.
That's awesome.
Have document.
What else? Awesome. Thank you so much. And just for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on more. So thank you so much for sharing. You know, number 4. So a lot of you are number 4. That's awesome. That's awesome. And what I want to say is that, like, whatever you choose, that's the right tool. That's the best way, the right way to intervene. Think of this as like your superpower. Again, there's no perfect way with the wrong way. Whatever works for you, that is the best, the perfect way to intervene. One time I was working, I gave a very similar presentation, and this person, she responded saying that, yeah, her partner is a police officer. So she grew up in a police family. So she thinks that she always had to be direct. And in reality, no, there's so many other ways that you can provide support. And number 5, yeah, ask the victim if she's okay. Beautiful, beautiful. And here's another scenario. So we're gonna practice another time. Oh my God, okay. So your Asian neighbor is fun and outgoing person. Recently, you learned that Sang was harassed by another neighbor. Sang was told, go back to where you're from, you Chinese virus. What could you do to support Sang?
The poll is up. So support, checking with Sam. Direct, report the incident to the building owner manager. Direct 2, directly confront the neighbor and explain the severity. And 4, refer, talk to a trusted neighbor to seek assistance or something else. And if it's something else, please let us know in the chat. I'm gonna allow a few more seconds on this kind of questions because we really wanna make sure that you take the time to think about the situation and really how you think you would react. So do take your time to answer. Right, people are starting to answer. Okay, and then the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, we have 50% say direct 1, 38% they want to support, and 13% something else.
Awesome, thank you. It seems like this group loves the direct one, which is awesome. It's beautiful, beautiful. So again, whatever works for you, that is the best tool. That is the best tool. Thank you for that. Thank you. So, all right. So now, those 6 are the tools. Actually, we're going to skip this poll for the 6th time. Those are the 6 tools on how to disrupt disrespectful events, you know, aggression, you name it, racism, sexism. You can apply that to any other inappropriate behaviors and language. So now, The next question is, how can we support? Remember earlier I talked about like experiencing these hate and racism. It's not fun. It's not fun. In fact, it's very painful, physically, emotionally, psychologically. So how can we provide support to people just went through hate and discrimination? It could be sexism or racism. And in this case, specifically anti-Asian racism. So how can we provide mental health support? So here are the 5 mental health supporting tools, because the common question that I got asked is that like, what should I do when someone, it goes through that, share me with their story or trauma story with me. Again, I'm afraid to say the wrong thing. I feel weird. I don't know what to say. And so the tools that I'll be sharing with you, hopefully will take the pressure away from that. So it can guide you so you will know what to do, and also help you to set some boundaries too. And I know a lot of you are here on non-clinical, so that is good because these tools are not clinical. Instead, it's an educational and it's practical tools that I've been using in my life. So I'm going to share I'm going to run through these 5 tools, and then we're going to practice on how to use them a little bit at the end. So first is ask. Ask and check in. Ask for clarification, for more information, and don't assume. Meaning that express your concern and show that you care by asking questions. Never ever assume. Why ask questions? So you don't come up as accusatory and judgmental. And you don't want to assume that because you know that person, that you know exactly what they're going through. No, you don't. You might have similar experience. Like for example, you might also experience some form of depression, but you don't know exactly what they are going through. I like to say that 2 people can be in the same car accident. One person can walk away like nothing happened. Another person might never ever drive again due to psychological, emotional trauma. So never ever assume. Instead, check in with that person and ask. And here are a list of questions that we can ask. My favorite one is always, how can I help? How can I help? Next one is what I call reassure. Show your support and care by reassuring. Be there for them. Verbally express your concern and care by providing support. The key word here is support. And here are the specific things that you can say. My favorite one is the second bullet point. It's hard for me to understand exactly what you're going through. And I can see that it's distressing. Please tell me more. Please tell me more. How powerful is that statement versus that, hey, you need help. You need to stop drinking. You need to exercise. No, it's not. It's not helpful. And remember that people might turn down your help initially, which is okay. Because one of the best ways to reassure them is to check in with them on a regular basis and on a consistent basis. Ultimately, it's about them, not about you, about how we can provide support. Next is the third one is what I call listen. Listen without judgment and interruption. So we're going to play some trivia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a question, ask you for a number, and please put the number in the chat box. So the first question is, how many words average Americans speak per minute? So please just throw in whatever numbers that you have in your head. How many words an average American speak per minute? 168. What else? 80. What else? Just get 200. Give me a couple more. Go on. 50, 70. Okay, coming in. Cool. What else? So average Americans speak about 125 words per minute. What is a mental capacity to understand someone speak per minute? So what is the maximum words that we can hear up to a minute? So give me a number, just shoot in a number. How many words our mental capacity 80, 25. I'm talking max 50. So 20, what else? 100, 100. Okay. What else? So, all right, here's the answer. We can listen up to 400 words per minute. Oh, here's the last one. How many words average people, American, actually hear and absorb per minute? How many words we actually hear and absorb per minute? Again, give me a number. Just throw out a number. 50, 80. What else? 50. 140, 100. Okay. Thank you. 20. Okay. All right. Here's the answer. 75 words per minute. So you do the math. You know, according with model minority myth, I'm supposed to be really good with math. So I'm going to show up with you with my math. So that's a joke. So we speak about 125 words per minute. We can hear up to 40 words per minute, but we only hear up to 75 words a minute. Why? Because we interrupt each other so much. The key thing about listening is that like when we provide support, when they are ready to talk and open up, ultimately, we just need to shut up. We just need to shut up and listen because it's about them. You know how often we interrupt each other. Studies have shown that when someone starts speaking, we interrupt them between about 15 to 20 seconds. They haven't finished their story yet. We already interrupted them. And in the workplace, studies have shown that whenever a woman speaks, that woman could be the boss, could be the owner, could be the front desk person. Whenever a woman speaks in the workplace, she gets interrupted between 8 to 10 seconds. And the moment you interrupt them or dismiss them, they will just close off. They're going to stop sharing with you. The trust is broken. So remember that. Ultimately, let them talk. Let them talk. You know, unless they ask for advice, don't give them any advice. Most of the time, advice, we don't like to be told what to do. So who like to have unsolicited advice? And most of the time, people just need someone to listen to them. They just need to vent. And you can ask questions only after they have finished talking. All right, next one, fourth is what I call support. Provide consistent support and care. A person may downplay what they are going through to avoid upsetting you or may not recognize there's a problem. Be aware that a person may not completely open up to you and share everything until they are sure that you care, that you are going to be there. So please let the person know that you are ready when they are. Never ever pressure them to talk, to share everything. Again, remember, ask, don't assume, ask. Because ultimately it's about them, not about you. Another thing that I want to emphasize is that if I were to express and experience love and care, this is by Dr. Gary Chapman. So everyone experiences love and care differently and express differently. Some people love words of affirmation. Some people is time. Some people is gifts. Some people is physical touch. Know what's yours and know what's your loved one, what people you care, what are theirs. Because you can prevent so many miscommunication by learning this. For me personally, for some of my former assistant, for her, it's words of affirmation. So what I would do is, in the past, I would just write her a little thank you note and put her on her desk. For me personally, I don't care about words. I don't care about gifts. Unless you're going to give me a Tesla. That's a whole different story. So we can talk about that later. So for me, it's quality time. I'm like, let's go have a coffee. Let's go grab a beer. Let's go for a happy hour. Let's talk. Let's go for a walk. So everyone's different. So understanding, knowing each other's their language of love and care can help you to provide even more support. And for me, so I work with a lot of college students. Well, just people in general. So food is, I think, should be the sixth one. So, I like to joke around that I'm a cheap date. So just grab me some 6-packs and a fried chicken. I'm happy, and let's talk and eat. So anyway, so this is support. Last one is refer. So refer is encourage them to talk to appropriate professional help assistance. So you care and you want to support them and be there for them. At the same time, you're not a trained therapist. There can be a lot of stress and pressure continue to be their quote unquote therapist. It can be draining to your emotional and mental energy. Ultimately, it's not going to be fair for you and your own mental health. So it's totally okay to encourage them to seek professional help. And there are so many different professional help. Talk therapy is awesome. At the same time, there's others. So some of you might think that, some of you might ask cost and logistics. And I like to use using physical health as an example. If you have a broken bone, arm, will you invest in treatment? The answer should be pretty obvious, yes. Similar to mental health, studies have shown that the longer you delay treatment for mental health, the recovery could be more challenging and costly, similarly to the broken bone. So these are the 5 tools. And again, do you remember from inaction to action? You observe the situation, check in with yourself, and decide which of these tools work for you. So now we are going to practice a little bit more. Here's another scenario. Do you remember Sam? We are following up with Sam again. So here's a poll. So since the incident, anti-Asian racist incident, you notice your neighbor Sam seems sad and distant. Normally Sam loves to show you funny memes. Now Sam rarely acknowledges you in the mailroom or in the hallway. You care about Sam. What could you do? Check in, ask Sam how Sam is doing, support, invite Sam over for a home-cooked meal, offer Sam to accompany Sam to run errands, tell Sam that you're available when Sam is ready to talk. Something else. If something else, please put your answer in the chat box.
Right, we're starting to get some answers.
Awesome.
A few more seconds. Want to allow people to really reflect on their answer. All right, 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm closing the polls, and we have 33%, very distributed. So we have a third saying checking in, a third support one, and a third reassuring, and the something else. We have somebody saying all of the above.
Awesome, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I love that reassurance. Just let Sam know that you're available when Sam is ready to talk. Again, don't pressure them. Sometimes maybe another example is that Sam might be okay as long as Sam knows that there's someone is there for him or her. That's the power of consistently checking on someone. So thank you all for sharing. All right, here's to our last scenario. You check in with Sam a couple of days later. Sam finally opened up to you and told you that the incident triggered Sam's trauma and anxiety. Also, Sam fears for his or her safety. Sam has no family members around. Also, Sam's family is more traditional and doesn't believe in mental health. How can you support Sam? Listen to Sam without interruption. Ask Sam how I can help. Reassure Sam by checking in on him, on her every 4 hours or whatever your relationship allows. Encourage Sam to talk to a professional, and maybe look up some local mental health resources and offer them to Sam. And something else. And if it's something else, please put it in the chat box.
Right, we're starting to get some answers.
Awesome.
Okay, we're gonna close in 4, 3, 2. All right, so 75% said they want to listen to Sam without interruption, and 30% they want to ask Sam how they can help.
Awesome. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. So these are 5 mental health supporting tools. So I hope that, by using these, by understanding that there are options, there are different ways to support each other through mental health, that you will be more open, that hopefully will help to continue to erase these mental health stigma around, around mental health, around racism. So, and I want to use this opportunity to address the question earlier that, like, how can we, back to that stigma, how can we Asian Americans or just communities address mental health stigma? And I think one of the most powerful thing that we can do is start with ourselves. Start with ourselves, meaning that educate more about our mental health. Share your mental health stories. You don't have to share your whole 30 years mental health challenge. Share a little bit. The reason we don't talk about mental health is because mental health is not normalized. At parties, at Thanksgiving dinner, what do people talk about? Most people talk about sports, work, gossip, blah, blah, blah. So the way, and mental health is not talked about. So for us to normalize mental health is by supply and demand, by common, what we call demand. Is that the more people just casually talk about it, the more people will know that, okay, it's acceptable. It's okay to talk about it. My dream, my goal is that hopefully one day I want, through my work, through encouraging people to talk about mental health, that one day that we'll be able to talk about mental health like how we talk about sports, how we talk about football and basketball. And it all starts with us. Yes, there's a lot of fear, a lot of stigma, said I know. And then we need to, so that's first step. And second step is understand where all those fear, all those stigma coming from, prohibiting us to talk about mental health and work on ourselves to overcome these unchecked, these unfound fear. We can do it. So, all right. So yeah, so hopefully this answers your question. And if there are no other questions, this concludes my presentation. So, feel free, earlier slide, there's my contact information. So please feel free to reach out if you want to talk more about diversity, inclusion, mental health, cultural competency, anti-Asian hate, or about how we can talk about, celebrate about our cultures, our heritage. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, JR. So while we wait for questions to come in, I want to thank you for this space. It was so enlightening, so inspirational, and really gave us a lot of tools because I feel like we just don't know what to do. So these tools really help with, starting to address the situations that unfortunately are just very common. So while we wait for questions, we want to quickly provide you with, this is my contact information. If you are interested in receiving individualized capacity building or training, please contact me. You are going to receive a copy of this training and the recording. So you will have access to this, and here is JR's information as well. We want to invite you for our coming webinars. We have youth and suicide in February, and we're also going to be discussing how the strong Black Latina woman stereotype affects mental health in this population. And let me check here for questions. So we don't have any questions. We just have a lot of really good comments. Excellent. Thank you so much, JR. The additional tools are awesome. Thank you for the seminar and your perspective. Very great information. So you will receive shortly as well an evaluation. We please ask you to complete it so we can get some feedback, and as well as JR, so we can continue working with you and for you. And we want to thank you all for being here and for joining us. JR, any last words before we conclude?
Yeah, my last one is, again, thank you so much, Joanna, for helping me out. Thank you so much for Proceed in hosting, organizing, inviting me for this opportunity. Thank you so much. And of course, to all the participants, thank you so much for your feedback and your engagement. So have a great week.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you in February, and keep an eye on the evaluation and the link for future webinars and for this recording. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend.